You see Joseph Smith and the Latter-day Saints go through this terrible period of imprisonment and being driven out, and then you see him start all over again with just as much passion and intensity in Illinois. I mean, this man, Joseph Smith, you cannot keep him down. This is a man with a mission.
Coming up next, a History of the Saints special presentation. Joseph Smith Papers, Documents, Volume 6. (1838 and 39) witnessed some of the most tragic and traumatic events in Latter-day Saint history. Events such as the massacre at Haun's Mill, the extermination order issued by Governor Lilburn W. Boggs in the state of Missouri, and the prophet Joseph Smith and others being locked in the dank, dark, and gloomy dungeon we call Liberty Jail. And that while the Latter-day Saints are driven from the state by mobs in the face of an oncoming winter. They would take shelter in Quincy and the surrounding county. It was a dark and a difficult time filled with intense suffering and persecution. And yet, out of all of that, there comes revelation, a new direction, and hope for the future. This episode of History of the Saints is a special presentation on behalf of the Joseph Smith Papers' newest volume, Documents, Volume 6, that covers this period of time.
Documents Volume 6 covers 19 months in the prophet Joseph Smith's life. It starts in February of 1838 as he and his family are moving from Kirtland, Ohio to Far West, Missouri, and then concludes in August of 1839 as Joseph Smith and other saints are settling Commerce, Illinois, where they'll build the city of Nauvoo. This volume has kind of tremendous challenges and lows in the prophet's life. His time in Missouri is spent building up communities, including the community of Far West, but also the communities of DeWitt and Adamon-Diamond. He is a part of the kind of tensions that arise with their Missouri neighbors.
All of the volumes of the Joseph Smith Papers are interesting. They all have important information that talks about all of his efforts over the years to build up this Zion. And in Documents Volume 6, you get a very interesting view of this effort because they'd been trying to build up things in Independence in Jackson County, and that crumbles, and then they're waiting around in Clay County trying to get back to Jackson County. That doesn't work out, and then they go to Caldwell County. So things there in Missouri have just kind of faltered and drug out. And then Kirtland grows for a while, but then in 1837, with failure of the bank and the internal dissension and other problems, things just really unravel. So when Joseph Smith in early 1838, when he moves to Far West, Missouri, it really is this special moment where you can kind of take a close look at how Joseph Smith is trying to rebuild. And the documents in the beginning of Documents Volume 6 are minutes of meetings, important revelations about the development of Far West, the organization of Adamon-Diamond Stake. You can really see Joseph Smith at work as a city builder, at work as a Zion builder. And that comes out very clearly in those documents. Then, of course, everything unravels again. Conflict breaks out, violence breaks out. You have the Mormon War in Missouri, which ends with the siege of Far West, the fall of Far West, the arrest of Joseph Smith and other church leaders, the imprisonment of Joseph Smith and these other church leaders, and the body of the Latter-day Saints being driven from the state. It's an utter catastrophe that has not happened to any other group of white people in America. Of course, the Indians underwent much worse. But in terms of the fabric of American political culture, this is unheard of for a group like this to be driven out of the state under the threat of extermination. And you have Joseph Smith spending 4.5 months in the dungeon of the Liberty Jail, which is dark, it's dirty, it's cold. This is a very, very low moment for the Latter-day Saints and for Joseph Smith.
It was during those troubled months in Missouri that a group was formed among the Latter-day Saints called the Danites, a group that has largely been misunderstood and misrepresented.
In June of 1838, the Saints started talking about how they would defend themselves in the case of mob violence against them. There are some accounts that Joseph gave a public discourse where he essentially stated this, that if the mob leaves us alone, everything will be peaceful, but if they come against us, we will fight back. He later echoed similar sentiments when he talked about this conflict, when he wrote about violence in the Liberty Jail letters. He used that statement. If the mob had just left us alone, everything would have been peace and quiet in the state. This tells us, I think, a little bit about the mentality of church members at the time, that they were going to defend themselves against opposition. Now, it's in this context that an organization that was initially known as the Daughter of Zion, but was later known more famously or infamously as the Danite Society, was formed. Now, as far as we can tell, the leaders of this group at the time that they were formed were regular church members. Luman Shurtleff, who was a faithful saint all the way throughout his life, settled in Utah, later remembered that he was a Danite and that he saw the society as a good organization that was gotten up for the defense of the saints. That's how the Danites saw themselves. They were defending the church from the expected opposition from non-members.
So this is a very, very dark time. This is a moment of crisis for the Latter-day Saints, and this is a very difficult time for Joseph Smith. He's in the dungeon of the Liberty Jail. And yet, what comes out of this experience? We have these magnificent letters to the church explaining Joseph Smith's point of view, receiving revelation about the meaning of suffering and the problem of evil. Some of the most inspiring revelation that we get from the prophet Joseph Smith comes from the dungeon of the Liberty Jail.
We also, in Documents Volume 6, reproduce 3 letters that Joseph wrote to the entire church. These are referred to as general epistles. These contain precious instructions that the prophet wanted church members to have while he could not be with them. In these general epistles, the prophet Joseph shared with the saints his own reflections on why the saints had been permitted to experience what they did in Missouri. He quoted from the New Testament. He shared his own prayers that he had uttered in the jail, where he asked the Lord how long the saints would have to suffer. He also recorded the Lord's response. So this will be familiar to most readers of Documents Volume 6 because it comes from D&C 121. The Lord's response told the prophet that suffering had a purpose, and that Joseph and the saints, by extension, were suffering these terrible calamities so that they could learn experience, that they could come to understand more deeply what the Savior had suffered for them. This was the message that Joseph sent to the Latter-day Saints as they were trying to regroup in Illinois. He taught them that suffering had a purpose and that the Lord was going to pour out knowledge upon their heads, that all the bogs in the world, all the mobs in the world could not stop the Lord from pouring out knowledge upon the heads of the Latter-day Saints. We have these treasures in the Doctrine and Covenants, but a lot of church members don't understand that D&C 121 to 123 is actually excerpts from longer letters. So in Documents Volume 6, church members will be able to read the entire letters and understand more deeply the context in which the revelations that are in D&C 121 to 123 were given. We have several letters that Joseph writes to his wife Emma Smith, as well as to church members. And readers of Documents Volume 6 will be able to read these letters that Joseph that Joseph sent to those that were close to him, as well as those that needed his guidance. 5 of these letters were written to Emma Smith in Joseph's own hand. Now we know from other sources that Joseph felt strongly about writing in his own hand to Emma Smith. This is something that's not always familiar to us today with texting and social media, but there is this sense that when you handwrite something, it's more intimate, it's more personal. And Joseph saw writing to his wife as something that he had to do as her husband. We have 5 letters that he wrote to her where he expressed love and concern for her, that he expressed remorse that he wasn't able to be with her or with their children during this terrible time.
I feel like Joseph in Egypt. Doth my friends yet live? If they live, do they remember me? Have they regard for me? If so, let me know it in time of trouble. Dear Emma, do you think that my being cast into prison by the mob renders me less worthy of your friendship? No, I do not think so.
His correspondence with his wife, Emma Smith, which is so personal and touching and loving and desperate. And so you get these magnificent documents coming out of this terrible period of Mormon history.
In April of 1839, Joseph Smith and his fellow captors are able to escape during a change of venue, a transfer, and they make their way to Quincy, Illinois, where their families and many saints have gathered. And it's at this point that Joseph is reunited with Emma and his children, and we have moving accounts of this reunion.
And they buy land in Iowa Territory and in the Commerce area, and then you see Joseph Smith going back to work with a passion. City building, trying to gather the saints, trying to rebuild this Zion community. And so in Documents Volume 6, you see this happen in Missouri. You see Joseph Smith and Latter-day Saints go through this terrible period of imprisonment and being driven out. And then you see him start all over again with just as much passion and intensity in Illinois. I mean, this man, Joseph Smith, you cannot keep him down. This is a man with a mission. And you see that unfold in Documents Volume 6.
After purchasing land in the Commerce area, Joseph and his family move up to Commerce around May 10th, kind of over the course of May 9th and 10th. And it's from this point that Joseph encourages all of the saints that would like to come north with him.
Another part of Documents Volume 6 that is really just amazing is the way that Joseph Smith holds the church together during the expulsion from Missouri. It's very easy to imagine the church just breaking to pieces and falling apart and everybody going back home to Tennessee or Kentucky or Maine or Massachusetts or Vermont. You can easily see the church just splintering into pieces. And some of that does happen. We do lose a lot of Latter-day Saints during that period. And people like John Correll are saying, hey, look, you guys, this just isn't working. They're driven out of the state of Missouri, unheard of in American history. Joseph Smith is in jail. And yet, they rebuild in Illinois and lay the foundations of what will become Nauvoo.
The Commerce area is kind of a swampy floodplain. At the time, it was infested with quite a lot of mosquitoes, and so the saints face kind of a severe malaria epidemic starting in July, and this epidemic lasts until November of 1839. So it's several months of just sickness and disease and even a handful of deaths where saints are passing away. During this time, Joseph and Emma spend a great deal of their time nursing the sick. When Brigham Young describes the area around their house, he calls it kind of a hospital where you have just people both inside the home and surrounding the home who are just sick and in need of care. And Joseph Smith himself is helping nurse the sick along with his wife and all of the other able-bodied saints.
Documents Volume 6 is filled with original documents that date back to the period of the events we're talking about. Why does that matter? Because now we have the opportunity to read those original documents and draw our own conclusions on the historical events that happened. And that provides us the opportunity to see history for ourselves.
So here you are looking at the primary sources. And you're looking at the primary sources for this very interesting and difficult period where Joseph Smith has left Kirtland. Kirtland is in shambles. They're trying to rebuild in Missouri, which is their land of Zion. There's conflict with neighbors. There's a war. It's called a war by the state of Missouri. The Saints get driven out of the state. Joseph Smith gets put in jail. They eventually rebuild in Illinois. So it's this very difficult period, very interesting period, and several histories have been written about it. Several articles in scholarly journals. Some are good and some are bad, and this goes both ways. There are people who really want to criticize Joseph Smith and the Latter-day Saints based on the actions they took to defend themselves in Missouri. There are people who want to point out, hey, your prophet is a criminal, he's in jail. On the other hand, you have like overly devotional histories by church members or by apologists that try to brush some of these uncomfortable facts under the rug, or just kind of only look at it in terms of trial and tribulation that the saints have to go through and overcome. But when you read the actual documents, now you're getting like the really gritty pieces of what actually unfolds. And so there you're going to see that the Latter-day Saints are not perfect, that Joseph Smith is not perfect, that they make mistakes, maybe some big mistakes. And at the same time, you're going to see their personality and character just genuinely, naturally, organically flowing through the documents. When you read the original documents from Joseph Smith and these men, you get a feel of their sense of mission. You get a feel for their religiosity, for their spiritual sensibilities. And so you're going to get all those dimensions of real history when you read the real documents behind the story.
Documents Volume 6 therefore provides a window into the prophet's personality as well as his leadership style in a time of great crisis and conflict in the church. In Documents Volume 6, church members will read documents that the prophet produced. They'll read letters that he wrote to the saints. These letters provided revelatory inspiration and guidance in which the prophet helped church members to make sense of what they've been going through. Now, even though we live in a different time, a different place, a different setting, church members can read these letters and their testimony of the prophet Joseph will be strengthened. They will see his ability to endure trials and tribulations, and that through these letters he was able to sustain his own family, but as well as the church itself.
Joseph Smith's first journal, you have a lot of his own handwriting there. In his second journal, you have some of his handwriting, and you have a lot of handwriting by a scribe who is taking down oral dictation. So you have a lot of Joseph Smith's own voice coming through. And then you have, over 100 letters from Joseph Smith. If you are down in the trenches like the editors of the Joseph Smith papers, going through this stuff carefully, I don't know how you could maintain the view that many have, that Joseph Smith is insincere, that he's a fraud, that he's a con man, that he's an imposter. Okay? You don't necessarily have to believe that Joseph Smith was a true prophet, but if you really do spend time reading and studying the Joseph Smith documents, I don't know how you can come away without a sense of his genuine spirituality and these ideas that he has about a Zion community where there's love and harmony. I mean, all this stuff shines through in his documents, that he is a religious person who has specific goals and aims that he's trying to achieve in terms of building a holy community. That's not fake.
Many church members today have ancestors who lived through these 19 tumultuous months of Mormon history. Documents Volume 6 is their opportunity now to read the original documents left behind that tell the story of that period of time. Today, what Latter-day Saint, young or old, has not endured trials, tribulations, and maybe even some injustice? Document 6 is an opportunity to go back and see how Joseph Smith and others found meaning and purpose to pain. Joseph Smith Papers Documents Volume 6 is available now. I'm Glenn Rawson, and we'll see you next time.